This material is made available to you by or on behalf of the University of Melbourne under Section 113P of the Copyright Act 1968. It may be subject to copyright. For more information, visit the University Copyright website.
There is positive correlation exists between the tendency of housing prices and debt amount by banks.
So now turn to the data collection. We set out the first table showing the graph combining with the quarterly residential property price index for the 8 capital city and the lending finance for housing, which is information from the Australian Bank. The line chart showing the average price index for the 8 capital city in Australia. The resulting combined with the right side of the number, focusing on the weighted average of 8 capital city price index, which is a dark purple line for this 10 year. There have some downward turn, but overall this is steady increasing, and the histogram graph showing the housing lending amounts, resulting combined with the left side. We also can see that there has been an upward turn in this 10 year. The next two figures showing the more clearly show the value of the mortgage and in Australia and the residential property price index of the 8 capital city. Furthermore, turn to the descriptive statistic of the residential property price index and housing finance. The first table showing the detail of the number for the 8 capital city and housing finance, including average number and the standard deviation. We focus on the histogram of housing mortgage, which is this table. As we can see from this graph, the average value of the mortgage is nearly 46 billion, which have the most frequency in there, and have the 65% of frequency between the 37 billion and 55 billion in Australia for the past 10 years. The limitation for the data collection, as we can see, the investment and owner-occupier housing finance are different, such as equity are different with the mortgage rates, and the dwelling in the scope of the residential property price index are too general. There's no information for sub-markets in there, such as price index for the housing or apartment type.
So, in order to figure out the relationship between RPPI and lending quota, we use the linear regression model and correlation matrix to seek their roots. Deriving from these two variables, we can easily draw a straight line from left to the right hand. So it means it is a positive linear relationship. And as housing price increase, people are more likely to borrowing money from banks. And if the housing price decrease, which could be the result of economic depression, banks also lend less money to the housing buyers. So secondly, other than the linear regression model, we also use the correlation matrix between housing price and lending quota. We made the matrix among these 8 cities. As Ting mentioned in the limitation, the lending condition did not specify the every eight age regions aspect. So for this reason, when compare every 2 cities together, and the red highlight means the highest correlation and the yellow one means the lowest, we can see there's no difference between the short term and long term. And for the highest correlation, it is between the Sydney and Melbourne in both quarterly and yearly times. The lowest correlation is given by the Darwin, and it has the lowest correlation with 5 cities. So we cannot use Darwin's property index to identify the property price with other cities. We also made a workflow chart to illustrate our data analysis. If there is no influence from lending finance to property index, the RPPI will not change. And if on the other side, if it changes, we need to consider other circumstances. On the short term, there is a positive linear relationship, but on the long term, there are other factors which could affect the RPPI, so the result will be dynamic. On the end, we suggest several recommendations to these data. When comparing the long-term relationship with 2 variables, more factors could be improved. A detailed information and data should be provided, such as lending quota for independent cities need to be examined by the government. Thank you for listening.
analyze the line, which does interest me very much. Actually, you have done a kind of preliminary research or analysis, and and it is great. And you mentioned that not only these two data, you are going to explore more factors to include or improve the current model. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I've got one question about your current research. Is that what do you mean by short term and long term?
Short term is like we think 10 years short term. And if we want to see the future trend, we need to compare more periods together.
Okay.
It's a long
Okay.
term.
Actually, I think there was a little bit misunderstanding. It's like short term is like we analyze the changes of some variables, several variables, the changes. So we see, for example, the changes in house price and the changes of the lending value. So that and the correlation represent the short-term correlation. And long-term is that we analyze the correlation between these two variables on the level that's house price and the value of lending amount. Yeah, so it's not. The short-term and long-term is not based on the period you selected, but based on the variable. If the variable indicates the changes, that means short-term analysis. If the variable you investigate is a level indicates the level condition of the normal condition, that's a long-term analysis. That means you can write this. But as a whole, it is very great, and the presentation is very well prepared. And one thing is probably you don't have to just read the subgroups. You prepare, and you could do more interconnection with the audience. Great, thanks.
Comparatively, regarding the poster, this is better than thing like in terms of composition. Like you compose well text and the figure balance. There is a balance, and to improve this presentation, like you can provide the legend or like where the figure is important. Like you explain the yellow color and the purple color, right? If you mention that, you don't need to explain. Like without explaining, also we can understand previously. So this means this, this means this. And you need to identify which one is more important figure. And accordingly, you can highlight that one figure and other you can be smaller. But otherwise, like as you said, you already did more than for this assignment. You already find the you already solved what you are going to do as a result. Cool. Well done.
Thank you. Okay, let's welcome group 5. Group 5 is
徐晴丽、赛林章。Good morning, everyone. I'm Alina, and this is Linda. It's our honor today to present the current research program of ENL Company. Today, we are going to introduce the research program by giving some basic background information, market conditions, proposed research method, and data briefing, followed by future research plan and limitation analysis. The overall background of our research is the continuing growth of population and favorable economic conditions, which makes Melbourne an attractive place for investors and developers. However, a more delayed or abandoned project has been found in recent years, which indicates a cooling market. Thus, only apartment with the right elements could bring significant profit to developers and investors. And these elements could include number of bedroom, car space, building facility, and so on. Among these elements, people will wonder if the offering car space in an apartment project within Melbourne CBD is necessary or significantly influence the selling price. So our research is since the public transport system is well established and connected in this area. So our research aims to investigate into this topic and provide useful information to investors and developers. Firstly, let's have a look at the demand and the supply. The demand of apartments is relatively strong with the support of population and economic growth. Moreover, as you can see in the pie chart, the blue parts represent the people who live in a flat or apartment in Melbourne CBD in 2016 census, compared to the smaller orange people who do not live in an apartment. And in addition, combating supply and decreasing apartment approval has been found recently, as you can see in the bar chart. The combating supply at this stage means that it's important for investors and developers to know what are the right elements the market wants. After the investigation of market conditions, our research is improved and enhanced. So to achieve the research goal, we will apply hedonic price model, which is a suitable method to find the relationship between different independent variables and the dependent. We'll collect all apartment transaction data within Melbourne 3000 from real estate's website from September 2018 to September 2019. Now we already have over 500 metadata. Detailed data briefing will now be introduced by Linda.
So the table on the top right corner includes all the variables that we'll need to put in the hedonic price model that for the cross-sectional analysis. So these all the variables are categorized into 6 main groups. So the apartment price, structural characteristics, facilities, service, and the transaction date. So we'll give some example to illustrate why we include some particular variables in this hedonic price model. So for the number of bedroom, so the number of bedroom is a dominant feature for the apartment buyers in the Melbourne CBD because the number of bedroom will determine the utilized area of the apartment, therefore the price of it. So the second one is the construction year. So the construction year variable will represent the apartment conditions, the level of the facility performance, and the management. It will also associate with the design features of the building. So, for example, if the construction year is more recent, there will be more sustainable buildings of the apartment, so they will have higher price. The second one is the facilities. According to the City of Melbourne Council, good practice of the multi-unit residence, it says that the major indicative asset and the components of apartment includes the swimming pool, gym, and garden. It will largely increase the apartment asset value. It will also affect the buyer's perspectives about the grade of the building and also their willingness to pay for it. The last one is the distance to the Burker Street Mall and the railway stations. So in Melbourne CBD, the Burker Street Mall is one of the most major retail, culture, and entertainment precincts with the higher concentrations of the retail facilities. So if there is a closer distance, it will satisfy the more residents' needs. Also, the closer distance to the railway station will largely expand the outer linkage to other suburbs. So there's a timeline of our database. Due to the high frequency of the transactions of apartments in Melbourne CBD, which is the time frame is 1 year period because we need to ensure that market condition is quite stable, and also the price fluctuations will relatively be steady. And now Alina will talk about our workflow chat.
Thank you, Linda. Based on our research, based on these variables, our research plans to do correlation and regression analysis after careful data selection. As you can see, we put all the data we have in the blue dot in the map. which then should give us some interesting and useful information about the relationship between car space availability and apartment price. Well, our research have limitations. Linda will talk about this now.
So there are three main limitations of the data. So the first one is the nature of the secondary data, and it will contain the uncertainties and inaccuracy. The second one is the limitation of information accessibility. So it was very basic and general because, we cannot show each transaction is one arm length. The third one is the time frame because we only choose 1 year period. So maybe the price only shows the short period housing market movements. For the alternative amendments to solve this kind of limitations, we will filter the database to get more matched property information, or we can do more primary data to enrich this database. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks.
I mean, that's a very good analysis proposal. I think, however, I mean, one thing you may improve in future is like current poster is still contain too much text, and also I mean the title currently is not a proper one because the main content you want to highlight is the topic. So is car space is a significant factor of apartment price. However, currently that's very smaller fault. I mean the apartment in Melbourne City, that's just like a scope of your research, right? So and also the current structure of your poster lacks a little bit logic flows. So it's like you pull the section without proper or preset order. So it's like if the audience lost or cannot follow one, they cannot find where are you. So it's like they don't have a proper order in the poster. I mean, that's one thing you may improve in future. And the theory and the theoretical model is very well explained, and most of the parameters are clearly identified. And I just have one question in regard with the distance, because I see you include two types of distance in your model, right? So
Yeah.
How do you define the distance? Because you say the distance to Burke Street, Burke
Street Mall.
yeah,
Burke
Burke
Street
Street
Mall.
Mall, right?
Mhm.
So how do you define Burke? If there is a point or the whole street?
The Burger Street Mall is a point. It's
It's a
like a
point.
shopping center.
So like
it's a-
Market.
Yeah.
Yeah, Burke Street, like between the Swanston and Elizabeth. So it's kind of a point. It's like, yeah, reach that part. Yeah.
And also the train station.
So
So how many train stations are you going to identify?
okay, I think there's
Are you going to include in your?
yeah, there's 3 stations: the Flagstaff, Flinders, and Melbourne CBD, Melbourne Central Station. Yeah.
So
total.
in that case, in your model, it's kind of you are going to use 4 parameters to indicate the distance, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
Wow.
but it's based on our research. If we find that, so it depends on, we may not include all these. If we find this quite similar for all the apartments that have a similar different distance to one station, maybe we won't include that, but we will test that. Because, for example, we may include all of these and test over the R square or something like that. If we find that its correlation is quite high, we may disinclude some of these.
That's
Yeah.
great. That's great. And also maybe you can, if too many distance are included, maybe you can, for example, for the train station, you can just use the average station of the 3 or 4.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very good project. I mean, really looking forward to what you can do additional Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, just to let you. So,
Okay,
group 6,
Yeah, we are the group 27.
27.
Yes, I sent you an email last night because I'm having a meeting this afternoon.
Oh, yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
it's just step. Thank you.
I think we got your.
You already got that?
I think so. 27. You used to in which session?
On the 4th?
Four.
The last one, yeah, the
There is
process.
310.
320. Yeah,
Group 4. And session 4.
thank you.
Alright.
Thanks.
So you are she and
承哲，
yeah.
承哲。
Okay.
Hi, good morning everyone. This is the ANC group and I'm Cookie. This is Angela. We are here to present our research paper on the topic Cheston Shopping Centers and the price of approximate residential properties. First, let Angela introduce the topic background.
Cheston Shopping Center was first opened in 1960s and becomes the biggest shopping center in the southern hemisphere. And it attracts a lot of residents to dwell around over the past decades. And the house price also reflect the increase. Shopping center as an good and also a bad externality. It can attract commercial convenience and also noises and pollutions, etc. But our research aim is to explore how the distance gonna affect on the property price. And I will let Cookie continue.
In review of a previous research paper, one of the most popular methods used in housing market analysis is the hedonic pricing model. Hedonic pricing model assumes that goods and services can be characterized as a bundle of attributes, and the price of product reflects the overall value of all attributes. It enables researchers to break down the subject and estimate the contributory value of each item. So, house has a variety of easily measured attributes compared to other products. The housing characteristics can be subdivided into 3 groups. The structure characteristics, such as the number of bathrooms, the land size, and the building age, and so on. And the second one is the community characteristics, such as the school amenities and the air condition and the income level of surrounding community. And the third one is the locational characteristics, such as the distance to CBD center and the proximity to transportation stations. In this study, we'll apply the hedonic model using the straight line distance from the houses to the Cheston Shopping Center as the key variable to analyze whether the presence of Cheston Shopping Center has the impact on the price of surrounding suburbs residential housing prices. The basic model is constructed as following, with the P represents the independent value, housing price, and the S and other variables including the size of the land, the number of bedrooms, the number of bathrooms, the number of parking spaces, and whether the house has fireplaces, swimming pools, garage, air condition, and the D presents the straight line distance between the house to the Cheston Shopping Center.
Now I'll introduce how we generate the data. So the logic of data generation is basically shown
the little picture here. So that we got original database, and then we narrow it down into 60 suburbs. How we get the 60 suburbs is you can see from this photo, from this picture, this one. So we centered Cheshunt Shopping Center, and we used radians with 5 kilometers, and then we draw a circle. And the 16 suburbs are within the circles. And because we find that each suburb had their boundaries, so not every properties within the 16 suburbs are within 5 kilometers. So what we do is we put the Cheshunt's longitude and latitude in the Excel, and we calculate distance, and we filter out the properties that is over 5 kilometers away. So that's how we get the data within 5 kilometers. And then we can generate the statistic summaries from the 5 kilometers one database, which is down here. And the figure 5, this one, is what we generate through QGIS. This one, sorry. And it shows all the properties that is within the 5 kilometers. I will let Quickie continue with the workflow.
The data, we use the database from the tutorial of the property data and tools, and it includes transaction information from residential properties in Great Melbourne from year 2010 and 2012. The raw data contains over 400,000 samples, and the data includes information on the transaction type, the transaction value, the property type, and the property attributes. So based on our topic, we use Nearmap to identify the 16 suburbs which located within or at the boundary of the 5 kilometer circle area around Cheshunt Shopping Center, and we use a filter in the Excel to select sample with transaction type is sale and the property type is house and suburb within the 16 suburb scope, and we further scope down the data with transaction date within the year 2012 to minimize the effects of transaction time.
So I want to add a little bit about the 3 maps at the left-hand side. So you can see the 3 maps indicates like the overall trend of the house prices. So for the first one, the red, the darker red it means the higher supply of the new houses are. And the second map illustrates the price for the new houses. So you can see this is actually reflect the trend of the new house supply of new houses. And the third map is the value for all residential buildings. As you can see, within the circle, there are a lot of dark colors in the circles, which means there are a lot of high-priced residential developments in the cycle. And we expect that's how we generate our overall trends. And in the last, I will say something about the results and limitations. So we expect the positive relationships. And for the limitations, the first one is the distance we calculate is not walkable distance. It's direct distance. So yeah, we kind of have to deal with it. And the second one is it is affected by a lot of other externalities, such as the distance to Monash, distance to other train station, and distance to city as well. And you can see from the third map, more properties close to the city, the higher price it is. So we kind of have to consider that aspect into the hedonic model as well. That's what we're gonna do with the amendments. And yeah, that's all. Thanks.
Yeah, in terms of poster, it's small. The important part is small. Like workflow is hard to read. And figures, there are like a lot of figures. You maybe I guess you generate using QGIS, right? So it's very hard to see what is it, small and so.
Because the size of the poster, I guess.
Yeah, size. In that case, like you can manage you play or designing properly with the text, and maybe you can reduce the amount of text and make bigger the figure, or this shaded figure maybe can be smaller. So you could try how it works. So you can try that.
Yeah.
And in terms of kind of theory, you will explain more. But for me, I have a question, because you have a focus on the influence of Chatstone on this property, right? Property price. So you should be aware, like, because you have considered other many factors. So how will you just look at the influence only from the Chatstone that you need to consider when you analyze? Because you need to identify. Is really because due to the sandstone shopping center, or there are, how you can isolate the influence of sandstone shopping center on the Cochin Press?
Yeah, that's a good question. In order to, like you said, isolate this factor, for the first round, we only consider the distance from Jackson Shopping Center. But for the second round, as I said, the amendment will add other attributes to compare before and after how's the correlation changed and how's the standard deviations changed. And I think I will present that in detail for the later assignments. And I'm really looking forward to do that.
Yeah, just particularly with Niraj comments that the major aspect, if there was something you can improve, is the one is your flow chart. Currently, it's not clear to say. Which is definitely one of the major points of this project. However, the other things, for your presentation is perfect. I think I'm consider you just a master, and this is only a subject. It's kind of, from my perspective, it's kind of like one first year PhD level already. Yeah, maybe not.
Thanks
yes,
so much.
Yeah, it's going to be a very, very good research, even from the research perspective. This is good. You have almost covered everything, and even though you got a very clear theoretical model, and you still think there was some limitation, and you even think one step further and how to address to those limitations. Find out. That's really great. One thing is maybe you can improve the poster, and another thing is that while you present all the information, that you should identify some key points to emphasize. For example, the data description. We've done lots of analysis of data already. However, within the table, is there anything you want to emphasize on? You really want the audience to acknowledge. You probably not just browsing on all the information within the table, but highlight the points you want to emphasize, which may let the audience know much better of your analysis. As well as excellent presentation.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
No problem. Group 7? Yep. Okay.
So this is the last one.
Yep, we are the last one before your break, before the toilet break.
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
Let's go.
So,
Okay, start.
good morning, everyone. I'm Fan. I have my colleagues Zhou Li and Eugene Lau Today we are going to talk about the crime rate and its impact on the housing price in Victoria. Melbourne ranked the 10th safest city in the world by the magazine Economics Intelligence Unit. While not all the suburbs in Victoria are safe as we expect it to be. And for residential properties buyers, there is no such tangible premium value attributed to safety for their consumption decision. For this assignment, we will use a hedonic model to analyze crime rates and how it impacts the housing price based on 9 suburbs in Victoria. For the 9 suburbs, we identify the top 3, the bottom 3, and the medium 3 by crime rates from the 79 suburbs in Victoria. Then we compare the housing price and crime rates and other attributes. Finally, we will evaluate and get the premium value of each attribute in the hedonic model. Here's how we work for the model. Firstly, we identify the parameters. The second step is data collection and cleanup. And then we will begin the regression analysis. Based on the result from the regression analysis, we adopt significance tests to see whether the data we collect will see the significance level. If yes, we will have an equation from the model which tells how much each attribute contributes to the housing price. If no, we will expand the sample size or optimize the attribute to obtain a better model. For the attributes of this research, we collect the housing price, number of bedroom, bathroom, garage, the distance to CBD, and the size of the land or residence. Last but not least, the crime rate. The data of crime rate is from Crime Statistics Agency. We collect the criminal incidents recorded for a particular local government area of Victoria per 100,000 population. We grab the data of real properties from realestate.com. The sample size of each suburb is 40 units, which means we have totally 360 units of the housing information in this research. Now let's turn to my colleague Lee. He will tell you about the findings of this analysis.
Okay, thank you, Zipeng. So hello everyone, I'm Ziyuan Li. So I will talk about our findings. Yeah, we have run some analysis on the data we collected. So first we do the correlation metrics, which can show the relation between each attribute. And from the results, we can see that the distance to CBD and crime rates have the positive relation, have the negative relation to the transacted price, as the number of bedroom, bathroom, garage, and the size of the dwelling have the positive relation to the transacted price. And the number of bedroom and bathroom have a bigger, and the correlation coefficient of the number of bedroom and bathroom is obviously higher than the other two, which means that the number of bedroom and bathroom have a bigger effect on transacted price. Then we calculate the median price, size of land, number of bedroom, bathroom, and garage, and based on this table, we do 3 charts. The chart 1 shows the analysis of the sample data collected by the structure breakdown in respective suburbs. Such analysis gave us an overview on the distribution of structure in respective suburbs and the insight to the typical, or we can say the optimal structure of the specification the most suburbs have. And the chart 2 and 3 give the visualization form of the crime rates per 100,000 population and the distance to CBD in respective suburbs. As the lower the crime rates, the safer the suburb is deemed to be. The further the distance to CBD, the cheaper the property is expected to be. So next we will hand over to Eugene and talk about our conclusions.
Okay, thanks, Ziyuan. Okay, so just to recap basically what my teammates have earlier covered, we have employed the hedonic model to stimulate the market evaluation of crime rates and its impact on housing prices. Main aim is actually really to derive value that is attributed to this, to attach a value to these intangible attributes that buyers like us subconsciously pay for. And such result can actually provide insight to consumers as to how much they can pay for a certain level of safety and security. And for developers wise, it will be mainly for pricing. So the findings earlier presented by Ziyuan also shows us greater insight as to how we can better manage and better manage our data and attributes. So with that, right, I'll proceed on to our expectations, the limitation that we face, and the recommendation to better improve this model. Okay, so basically, if you were to look up, right, based on the few points up there, so we're actually expecting all our attributes to, such as increase in bedrooms, bathroom, garage, size of dwelling will actually lead to a higher price, but to a certain extent, because ultimately we feel that price may not increase in tandem once the house is beyond its optimal specification, as we have highlighted earlier in the charts. Then also to mention that the general rule of thumb still applies. The nearer you are to CBD, the higher the price. And we also believe that lower crime rates should result in a higher price for our suburbs. So let's move on to our limitation that we face. So we have to highlight that not all suburbs that have sufficient land transaction data for analysis. And we also feel that 9 out of the 79 local government areas, which is represented by the council seat suburbs, may not be representative of the population, and high rates may be distorted by areas that has a low residential population, where 1 or 2 additional crimes may blow up the apparent crime rates. So our recommendation actually is to run a new model based on more significant attributes compared to the previous model, and to increase the sample size by increasing the number of suburbs from 9 to 15. And finally, to run regression across the 3 categories, top 5, medium 5, and bottom 5, to further validate the model to test the significance of crime rates and housing price. That's all. Thank you.
That's great. Yes, we can see very massive efforts and you have spent for your project. And just one question: what is the topic of your analysis?
Our topic is actually to analysis of crime rates and its impact on housing price in Victoria.
So in the poster, the crime rates, the crime rates.
Yeah, crime rates.
Yes, crime rates.
Has not been highlighted. Has not been highlighted. Which figure is for crime rates?
Well, there's the chart.
It's actually in chart 2.
We just give the visualization form of the
correct
of the crime rates.
Yep.
We create our suburb.
This is actually a visualization of the data that we have. So crime rates per 100,000 population in the respective suburbs, which in which we are actually color coded.
Yes.
Apologize for the lack of legends, but those in orange are actually the highest crime rates.
Groups.
Then the green ones are those typical crime rates, which is we add as a control.
Yes.
And whereas those in blue are actually low crime rates.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you probably should highlight this chart while you do the presentation. Okay. That's all the thing I'm expecting to see in your presentation.
Sure.
However, I mean, you spend a little bit relatively more time to explain the housing structure or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another thing is that maybe you should give a little bit of description of the background of your topic. It's like, okay, where is it start from, and what's the main problem you are going to address in the very beginning.
Okay.
And how you highlight it, identify those areas. I mean, you list all the things in the poster, however, in the presentation.
Yep.
You didn't spend, much, maybe enough time to cover this part. Okay. But the other part is very good.
Yeah, the topic is very interesting.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And as you said, like now you know which part is the important part of your board, right? So highlight that. You can reduce board and whatever you can do, but identify what you need to show. Like you already said that you don't have design. So if you have design, then like it's already clear, right? Color, background, colorful. And in poster, the top headline topic, you use a comic standard.
Yeah.
Be careful, like it makes difference, like because all the fonts are different and that is different, and it's not that going online also, right? So it's a simple thing, but
I understand where you're coming from. Or actually, we wanted the topic to to be a bit more how I put it, to bring out the topic, and hence the title is in different format compared to others. And comics, actually we know that typically we shouldn't use it, but because it brings out the attention, so we decided to. Point noted, yeah, we're glad that you notice it as well.
And one thing, other thing, in correlation, if you look at, the crime rate is also correlated with the size of house, right? Like
yes.
You find something. So,
yeah.
But it doesn't make any sense, right? Like the size, house of size and the crime rate. So what I want to say that, yeah, it makes sense. Like normally, if you think crime rate can reduce, affect the housing price, but if you can provide some other evidences that says like say some because of the crime rate, something is the house price is getting influenced casually, so not like just numerical correlation. In your background or when you talk about topic, if you can show some evidence, research, evidence that it will support. Yeah, the housing price is doing something. I mean, crime rate is influencing housing price. That's of course like if there is a causal relationship.
Oh.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right. So probably we have 5 minutes break and start the session 2.
那我怎么动？我相当于只能动一次。它怎么平移呀？它不能，它不能，就这样的。那这个。
Okay, I think probably we have to make a start. Otherwise, we cannot catch up the schedule.
Can we start?
Group 8. So, Yuan Yuan, Chen, and Zhao. Liu Zhao.
Good morning, everyone. We are here to introduce our company's analysis service with you. Our service would be definitely benefit, reliable, and feasible. Here is an example of our company's analysis service. After our presentation, there will be a Q&A session. This project is to use the hedonic model to evaluate residential housing price in Marinda, which is a suburb of Melbourne, 29 kilometers northeast of the CBD. Basically, there are a number of approaches to analyze and evaluate housing price, such as cost approach, income method, and hedonic model. The reason why we choose hedonic model typically because it could compromise various factors in relation to residential housing price, such as the number of bedrooms, building area, construction year, and so on. So this model is better for analyzing housing price. Another thing I'd like to point out is that we firstly adopted sample regression, then is the factor analysis. Finally, we use the SPSS regression afterwards to get our final result. The result shows adjusted R square reached 0.802. It's pretty good to demonstrate the result, which is that hedonic model has been proved in this project. And we got a conclusion that among those factors, housing price would increase over time. In addition, we also found that construction year, zoning, and all improvements have the biggest impact on housing price. Next part is the data treatment and as well as some detailed process involved in this project.
Well, first, because some data itself can not be analyzed by regression, so we applied the quantitative variable quantitation methods by SPSS. The method is very useful, and it does not affect the final results of a regression. Then we also express the influence of transportation on the location with other factors. We apply the latitude and the longitude of the location as the original variables, and then we convert it into the distance between the public transportation as the spatial analysis. In addition, we also apply the September 5, 2019 as the valuation day, and took the period between this time and the last sold date as the 10x. Given that the last sold price will be affected by many factors that are continually changed, the selection of the valuation data should not be based on the data which is too old. However, if we only choose the data is very time sensitive and very new, we cannot get the results from efficiency analysis. So we collect all 4,800 data and select 30 samples from them. Based on the regression analysis with 12 variables, we found that our results negative skewed distribution. And the right skewed distribution shows the limitation of our analysis, while the reason of the negative skewed is the minimum value. So how this minimum value get out? So we guess that it is because our approach is not operable for the small sample size.
In the improvement process, our group analyzed the population of the data, which is nominal distributed as demonstrated in the picture. Because there are 12 variables and some of them have similar meanings, we choose to apply factor analysis to combine similar variables As in the rotated component matrix, the result shows that factor 1 mainly comes from X4 land area, X5 building area, X6 frontage and explains area. Factor 2 mainly comes from X9 construction year, X10 last day sale months, and X11 building condition code, indicating construction and time. Factor 3 mainly comes from X1 zoning, and X3 street type representing location. Factor 4 mainly comes from X2 street name, X7 qualification of service that states the condition of service. We use the result of factor analysis to do regression. And the result is, and the adjusted R-square here is 0.64. We are not satisfied by such a result. And then we did further analysis to improve adjusted R-square by employing SPSS regression stepwise. It delivers 9 models for us. We choose model 7 because it has the highest compute outputs of both adjusted R-squared and F-value. The result is shown on our poster. Noticeably, X9, 1, and 8 have the biggest impact on the price, and X9, which stands for construction year, has negative relation with Y. Adjusted R-square in this regression here is 0.802. Here the hedonic model has been proved, and X and Y has linear relationship. So this is our project. Please feel free to ask any questions. There is a mistake in our poster.
Yeah, that's the thing. Because I couldn't see any really correlation between your presentation and the current poster. So I'm totally, honestly, I'm totally lost. What are the figures?
Because we have so many results, we can't post it all.
Yeah, and anyway, the thing is that the main purpose for this presentation is that we want to see how you design your analysis rather than your analysis results. So your analysis results is going to be presented in your final assignment. It's not this one. For example, what we are going to find is how you define the scope of your data. So what are the servers or locations you collect those data, and what is the temporal interval, and what are the parameters you included in the model. I mean, we don't know this. And you use too many like the terminologies, right? Like X, Y, X2, X3. I mean, we are not you, right? We don't know what the meaning of X1, X2, or X3. So it's I mean, and also you just highlight in the poster now. You highlight you just list all the headings, for example, introduction, method, results, discussion, background, and there's, I mean, the content under the headings does not explain the heading. So, for example, background and theory explanation, data treatment. What is a mechanism? It's yeah. I mean, I think probably you may misunderstand the content of this assignment. I mean, maybe you have already moved ahead of this subject schedule. However, just based on the assessment purpose, because I mean, that is not the poster or the presentation we expect at this time. I mean, but anyway, it's a good efforts you have already inject in your project. I mean, however, while you prepare the next or the assignment 3 and assignment 4, you should be pay more attention to. So, for example, what is the topic, right? It's not just like an application of a hedonic model. You are using a hedonic model to address something. And also you have to explain more clearly about the parameters, how you identify the parameter, how you collect those data. And I mean SPSS or even QGIS, it's not a method. It's just a tool or technical software. We do, yeah, so it's like cross-sectional regression. It's not SPSS regression, something like that. I mean, it's great. You move ahead, and however, I think maybe now you can a little bit slow down and rethink over your project and make the story more informative. It's not just doing. We are not just doing a calculation. We are using the calculation technology or knowledge of mathematics to address some issues in property sectors.
Could we explain a little bit?
Sorry. That's the rule for the presentation. Maybe you can improve in your following assignment. However, for this one, that's what it is. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, group 8.
9.
Sorry, this group 9.
This is 8.
Oh, sorry. That's group 9.
Yeah.
It's group 9. Yeah. Sorry, group 9. Yeah, let's double check it. 郑嫣彤、小齐、易然。
Yeah.
Okay, let's start.
Hello everyone, we are Group 9 and I'm Zheng Hongyi, glad to introduce our project. Our topic is the analysis of the suburban difference of 3 income groups housing affordability among Melbourne inner and fringe. It's kind of a long topic, but the main point is we want to assess whether there is or how large it is the housing affordability gap in Melbourne suburbs. And our motivation started from the Gini coefficient, which is higher than 0.4 since 10 years ago for the whole Australia. And for Melbourne, according to ABS data, the situation should be even worse. The Gini coefficient should be higher than 0.5. So that the income gap is kind of large in Melbourne. So that we suppose there should be also a housing affordability gap in Melbourne suburbs. We using suburb as a unit, wanted to design a sort of indicators to measure such a housing affordability gap. So that with the analysis of our research could be divided into 2 levels. One is inner suburb level, another is inter suburb level. So that we not only compare or focus on the housing affordability gap in specific suburbs, such as the housing affordability gap in Fitzroy, in North Melbourne, in Kelton. We want to also compare the housing affordability gap among different suburbs and draw a housing affordability pattern, housing affordability gap pattern in Melbourne suburbs. Overall, our module is a hedonic module, and the main parameters include the housing price, housing types, weekly income of 3 different income classes, and suburb locations and some sub-factors.
And in order to begin our analysis, the category of suburbs is imperative. So as we can see in the map, this map, it shows the boundary of each suburb in the statistical area too, and also demonstrate our range of analysis from the inner Melbourne to the Melbourne fringe. The pink area in the inner is the level 1, which includes 7 suburbs. The outside light blue area is the level 2. It contains 15 suburbs. And the last one is level 3 in the outskirts. Is the light orange, it's level 3. It contains 19 suburbs in total. We define and categorize those suburbs in a strategy that level 2 share the same boundary with the level 1, and the level 3 share the same boundary with the level 2. Let's move to the Kiki's part.
Okay, now I will talk about the PAD divided by P20 ratio. This ratio is calculating the household income at the 80th percentile to the household income at the 20th percentile. We are searching for the P80 divided by P20 ratio in inner Melbourne and fringe, which show the gap between the rich and the poor in each suburb. If the household income inequality increase, the P80 divided by P20 ratio also increase, and therefore the unequal society is. There are three income groups will be introduced in our research, the median family income, P80 average, and P20 average. First is the median family income. It's the sum of the total personal income, the weekly one, of each family member aged 15 years and over present in the household. And the total personal income applies to all family where one or more members are aged 15 and over. Family income does not apply to the non-family households, such as the group household. Moving to the P80 average, is showing the income per top 20% of earner. We use the total income multiplied with the income share of the top 20% of earners and get the top 20% of earner earned in suburb. Then using the ratio of the top 20% of earner in the suburb to calculate the number of the top 20% of earners in the suburb. Finally, we use the income earned by the top 20% of earners to divide it by the number of the top 20% of earners in each suburb, so we can get the value of each top 20% earner get in each suburb. And about the P20 average, is showing the income per last 20% of the earner. Based on the P80 average we get, just mentioned, we divide by the P80 divided by P20 ratio, so we can know the value of the P20 average. And so the housing affordability compare indicator A80, A50, A20 will be built like the income gap indicator with P80, P50, P20. Also assessing the affordability gap between the different income class in special suburbs.
And in terms of the dwelling types presented in the inner Melbourne and the fringe, we divided the dwelling types into 4 categories based on the 2017 census by ABS. Those types are the separate house, semi-detached raw or transit house, a 5-floor apartment, and the last one is the other type of dwellings like a cabins and houseboats. And in the poster, we select the 3 suburbs from 3 levels respectively. And those are Carlton, Richmond, and St Kilda. In this pie chart, the apartment and the flat took up the largest part of dwelling types among those 3 samples. And let's move to the next part, dwelling price. And we found that the percentage of other types is almost counting 0 in the census. Therefore, we decided to abandon these categories and focus on the type of house and apartment. In addition, it is hard to collect each type of dwelling, so we will group the separate house and the semi-detached raw or transit house into a same group. Then there will be a searching for a price of 2 categories of housing type, house and apartment, which is also the first limitation of our analysis. And the data of price of housing will be used in the model also based on the price of house and the price of the apartment. And let's move to the last part of presentation, the limitation. The first limitation is the price of each housing type is not comprehensive, which is just as I mentioned before in the dwelling type price section. And the second limitation is that lack of incomes for the richest and the poorest family, which means that we can only find the personal weekly income among the P20 group. And the P80 group, however, P50 groups, the data is based on the weekly household income, which will affect the accuracy of our analysis. And the last limitation is the error with P20 average in deducting calculation, which is demonstrated by our group member Kitty before. That's all for the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks. That's an impressive project, and I have one question. So, how do you define the affordability gap? What do you mean by that?
For the housing affordability gap, do you know that the key coefficient is the income gap? So the difference between the which is one like the P80 ratio for the relatively affluent group, their income and
so it's
divided by
like the gap between different income level.
yeah,
right.
Okay, it's not the gap between across the suburbs.
The final pattern, we can draw a pattern with the income gap between different suburbs.
Different suburbs have three different income tax. And
Like the-
we will compare the three different suburbs in the.
We will finally get the A80, A50, A20, and its ratio in different suburbs, and so that we can compare that with different suburbs.
Did you include how much, how much percentage of their income they spend on housing? Did you include that?
The family income will be based on the equivisible income that they can spend.
Income, like how much percentage of the income they spend on housing?
They spend on housing. No, we justified the housing affordability, not they have spent on housing. We want to
How do you calculate the housing affordability? Using the price ratio, price income ratio?
Using the median housing price or the average housing price divided by the weekly
income.
Divided by the income and other sub-factors. Because the family composition should also have some improvement on that bit.
And you are going to use the spatial analysis or?
Kind of spatial analysis.
Okay. Okay.
Because our unit is suburb, not the family or housing.
Okay.
So you assume that rich money, rich people will buy expensive house, right?
No.
That assumption here, that's an assumption.
What?
If somebody has good income, then they will buy expensive house, right? That's an assumption.
No, the housing affordability focus on whether they can take the medium housing, not they will spend on the expensive house. It's affordability.
The thing is that I just don't quite understand what's the idea you are going to identify the gaps or all the differences between because first it's like you have to make the definition more clear. What do you mean by gaps? Is that gaps across the different income people, or the gaps across the suburbs? Now yes, he said. So however, he also said that
both. Yeah, both.
Yeah, the thing is that I don't understand why you're going to identify this one. But what's the problem you are going to address to?
The housing affordability gap problem in different suburbs could be different. So maybe
of course.
Maybe in Kelton, the housing affordability gap is serious than Fitzroy, so that we want to measure such a gap. Yeah. So by calculate the A80 divided by A20 ratio, according to our formula, we can calculate out the housing affordability gap in Kelton and in Fitzroy, which is bigger. So that.
Okay. So you just compare. Just want to describe the spatial patterns.
Yeah, the spatial pattern.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. All right. Thanks.
Okay, so. Yeah. Okay. Hello everyone. I'm very glad to be here for this presentation. And first of all, let's have a look about our background. And Australia is a country mostly made up of immigrants, and there are many research prove that house prices are determined in part by the migration, and
by population growth, and migration is the main source of population growth. So migration would affect the labor market, employment rate, and the income. But the most important one is that they need houses to live. So this means that there might have a relationship between the migration and the house markets. And so Victoria has attracted more and more immigration as New South Wales. As a result, we selected Victoria as a base on our relationship between immigration and house markets. Our aim is to examine the clear relationship between immigration and the house market in Victoria. And as our objectives, they are mainly divided into 4 parts. The first one is the demands of migration in Australia. The second one is the time series of traditional factors and migration data. And the third one is the data about changes in house prices in Victoria. And the last one is we need to establish a fundamental model and apply linear regression to isolate the relationship between migration and house markets from other traditional factors.
So in this research, we need to apply the time series model as a fundamental model. The time series most time series is a sequence taken at equal intervals in time. So to search how those fundamental models and immigration to affect housing price in Victoria, it is efficient to collect data and make time trends over a similar period of each indicator. So we can say that we choose three fundamental factors and migration, and we collect all the data from the ABS, which is the official statistic website in Australia. And because each unit is different, so for the accuracy, we calculate and apply the growth rate of each indicator. So the first one is the property price. A property price is the residential property price index. We can see from the graph that it increased and decreased significantly from 2007 to 2011 and then become gentle, which means that in that period, the activities of house market is active and attract the most investor entry in this market. And then it has been a downward trend in last couple of years. Next one is the GDP. GDP is the most important factors which reflect the economic conditions in Australia. And we can see from the graph that the GDP have similar trend with property price. Next one is the interest rate. Interest rate has the implement of the government or banks for monetary policies, which will play an important role in real estate market. For example, if the interest rate is lower, then the cost of real estate investment will also lower, and then the return on investment will be higher. So we can say that in 2008, the interest rate will have an opposite trend with the house price. Next one is the unemployment rate. The lower unemployment will increase residential income level and also the purchasing power, which will encourage investors to focus more on the real estate market. Finally, is migration. For the migration, we use the growth rate of number of movements of permanent arrivals in Australia. So we can say that the changes in migration numbers are cyclical, and then the house price, I found that the house price change in the same way over the next 2 years of the migration changes, which can mean the migration will have opposite relationship with property price. Thank you.
Here is the workflow. A stationary test is necessary for us using to build the model. It does not mean that series does not change over time, just that the way it changes does not itself change over time. The first step is collecting all data and then test the stationary according to its unit rules, and if yes, build the model. But if no, do the second stationary test according its first difference of unit rules. If yes, build the model, but if no, we need to find the new data.
Our expected result is that immigration and housing price are positively correlated. And from our research, it's expected that after 2 years, house price will in turn affect the number of immigrants because of the high house price. Through our findings, there are two potential limitations. First, types of variables is not enough, and the time limitation. Also, our data about immigration is the whole Australia, but the house price is the Victoria, because we can't find the Victoria immigration data. So our next step, we will change this to improve our model accuracy. That's the end. Thank you.
That's good. And so we can see the whole picture of your analysis according to your presentation. There was something I want to make sure is that, for example, when you see the property price or something, what data you are using?
The property is using the residential property price index, the growth rate of that, because the unit is for each indicator is different. If we use the original number, it's not. So we use the growth rate.
And what's the data for the migrations?
Migration is for the growth rate of the number of movements for the permanent arrivals in Australia.
In Australia or?
Yeah, because we say Victoria, but for the Victoria we cannot find the accurate data. So our next step is to find the more accurate, but now we just use Australia.
Yeah, I think that would be a problem because of the Australian system. It cannot provide
the accurate for the Victoria migration.
I know there was there was one data also published by the
ABS.
It's called like the population movements, or it covers two series. One is interstate, all the population. I think that it's account for the natural change, interstate change, and also the overseas residents. So I mean, probably rather than using the current data.
Okay,
I couldn't remember what's exactly the title of that survey. Okay, and the experiments.
Yeah, that's your leadership at that level. And in terms of poster, you can improve.
Yes.
The subjects and the topic also. You already mentioned. Topic says in Australia and this was question in Victoria.
Oh yeah.
So doesn't align with each other. And I think the current poster is still contain too much text, and all the figures you show is hard to understand. Right? So, for example, GDP. I mean, the thing is that we don't exactly know what's the trend of GDP. It's like why you include GDP into your model. Okay.
So we need to add some words.
At this stage. Yes. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Group 11.
Yes.
Let's start.
Hello, everyone. We are Group 11. This is Claire, this is Neil, and I'm Ricky. Today, I want to introduce my topic is the effect of regional shopping center on apartment price in Melbourne. So first of all, by researching, do you know that Australia has one of the largest shopping center area per capita in the world. So as Melbourne city boundaries spread and the people live just far away from the CBD, developers and the retailers are recognizing the shopping center should be located in residential area to provide neighboring residents a higher degree of the convenience, comfort, and accessibility. As a result, super regional shopping centers such as High Point Shopping Centre, located in the west of Melbourne, has gradually become the most important facility affecting the people who live near there. So our research is to study the correlation between distance from the shopping center and apartment price in Melbourne. So we also consider about our attributes like the distance, how far these apartments to the parks, supermarkets, and the schools. So here is our research question. I've mentioned about this, just have a look, feel free. And our first aim is to study the relationship between the apartment price and its structural and the spatial attributes. And the second goal is to identify the intensity of the impact of shopping center on apartment price using the hedonic model as well. So here is the more specific information about the High Point Shopping Center. So we can see the open years and more specs. And then we use the QGIS to make the graph, visualize this data as the graph. So this red point here is the High Point Shopping Center, and this green point is the apartment. So around the shopping center within 7 kilometers. So, and the black point is the train station. So it is easier to visualize them data and to get them to see it directly. And then we have Neil to introduce the next part.
Okay, so continuing from Yuki, I will discuss about how we conduct our research. For the data source, we mainly use district data to collect physical attribute of over 1,000 apartments and QGIS to illustrate the distance from each apartment to High Point shopping centers and other amenities. So our research method is hedonic model. It measures the influencing effect of these characteristics on overall transaction price, and is developed by using the coefficient generated from a regression analysis. So in terms of attribute, we recognize that there are physical, locational, and neighborhood attributes that may affect the apartment price. But in the scope of this research, we only choose the following attribute in the table below. So in structure, we have apartment size, number of bedroom, bathroom, car space. In locational, we have distance from High Point, CBD, and other amenities such as train station, supermarket, park, and school. Before moving on to the result that we go, I'll let you run through the workflow that we have to follow to generate our research. The process begins with identifying our research topic and analysis method. The spatial and temporal boundaries are then set to narrow down the scope of our research. The next important step is to decide what are important attributes and how to collect the relevant data. The data is then processed and being used to run the correlation test. Then the regression test is run. If the result is acceptable, we can incorporate that into the equation formula. If no, we disregard that and running into another attribute. Our final result of the research will be an equation that calculates apartment price as a function of physical attribute and distance from shopping centers and amenities. So Claire will present to you the result that we achieved.
We conducted a preliminary analysis with the data we collected and present them with the 3 graphs. The first one, the line in the graph 1 shows the price per square meter, median price per square meter. It increases with the distance with the shopping center. And the median and average price of the apartment unit are increasing. The reason behind this is that the apartments in this group, they are closer to the CBD. So we add the distance to CBD as one of the variable. The second graph here, it shows the average number of bedroom, bathroom, and car park for these three groups. And we can see the group 3, 5 to 7 kilometer group has the most number in bedroom, bathroom, and car park. The last graph shows the average distance to various facilities. So the first group, it has close the distance to supermarket, primary school, and secondary school. And the group 5 to 7 kilogram has the shortest distance to tram station, park, and CBD. So the model is not perfect due to a few limitations. First, the scope and the time impacts of the shopping mall are ignored, while the influence of the shopping center over time will be an factor. Second, the scope and size of the sample limited to the new developments, and mostly they are located in east side to the High Point shopping center. And the other two limitations are the scope of variables that are not comprehensive because we didn't include some physical attributes as the floor of each unit number, the total floor number, building age, and quality of like schools. And the last one is the including distance does not reflect the real accessibilities to these facilities. So we can enhance this model by enlarging the sample size and the scope of the sample and adding more attributes. So this is our presentation. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, I think actually I do like your presentation and do enjoy it. That's very impressive. And the great thing is that you not only show the big picture of your project, you also use some example to highlight some the data you are currently using. There is only one concern I have is that you initially want to identify the effects of high points shopping center, right?
Yeah. Yes.
In your model, you also included all the supermarkets. So I'm just wondering how you identify the supermarkets within that area. I mean, the thing is that currently, as you mentioned, you can expand your sample or maybe include more factors. I mean, I reckon you probably think the other way, or you probably should delete or exclude some parameters. Currently, the parameters is not enough, but maybe too many. The thing is that I mean, the supermarket. How do you separate the effects of supermarkets and the high point shopping center? I mean, there's the supermarkets. There's too many supermarkets.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so how do you separate the definition of supermarkets and the high point shopping center? I mean, it's a little bit overlapped.
That's true.
Yeah, I like how you explain your data and your understanding and the context using graph, and you are very clear what you need in terms of variables and data. So that's how you explain very clear. That I like. If you could do that same with poster, it would be great. It would be great. So, but that thing I like. And the similar question also, like you showed in the graph the distance from the train station, but there are many train stations close by, right? So, what did you consider? You consider closest one, or?
I consider the closest one.
Closest one.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. If you can mention that also, it's clear. No? There are so many train stations nearby in each apartment.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for your
Thank you.
comment. Thank you.
So let's welcome group 12. 求于陈明2前的于天。
Hello again, everybody. I'm glad to have the opportunity to give a presentation here. The subject of our presentation today is the overall research plan of the Melbourne student apartments rental rates analysis. The first thing I'd like to talk about is the background of this topic. As we all know, the international students' population is continuing to increase in both universities and other education sectors in Australia, and the underlying dynamics of the Australian higher education market is continuing to support increasing development into new purpose-built student accommodations. However, for us students, it's easy to get lost in so many choices in students' housing market. The room times, room facilities, apartment services, and the location could all affect the rental rates. It's closely related to our life, and that's why we choose this topic. Our aim of the research is to use the hedonic model to simulate the market evaluation of the rent of student apartment near University of Melbourne and RMIT City campus. And we try to figure out what is the most critical factor affecting the rent. By doing so, both students and apartment suppliers could benefit from it. Students could have guidance when they make housing decisions, while the operators could be provided with more appropriate development models. Since our theoretical model has been taught in the class, so I just to move on the data part. We choose the apartment which are located within walking distance of the University of Melbourne and RMIT City campus, including some well-known brands like Journal, Urban Nest, Unilog, Igloo, and so on. All the data about the apartments was collected from their official websites. The rent data we use to analyze is the weekly rent per person. We remove the data of common amenities in all apartments, such as heater and refrigerators, and access some data of the amenities that have effects on rents, such as air conditioner and whether the rent covers water, electricity, and internet fees. And that's all I have to say about my research introduction, and let my teammates to give the following presentation.
Next, let me show you some factors that affect the rent of student accommodations. The first one is distance. The first one is distance. A short distance from university must be an important factor when choosing a student accommodation. If it is close to CBD, it will be more popular because it has easier accessible services and amenities, including restaurants, cafes, and entertainment areas. The second one is brand. Generally, the rents of student accommodation with famous brands will be higher. Some brands concentrate on creating comfortable rooms, providing students with dishwashers, ovens, while others focus on their cost performance. Next is air conditioner and the bills of water, electricity, and internet. Obviously, the installation costs of air conditioners are very high, so the rents of rooms with air conditioner tend to be higher. It is also obvious that whether the rent includes bills or not will definitely affect the rent. And the next is lease. As far as the student accommodation owner concerned, a longer lease means a steady income, while a shorter lease means the room is likely to be vacant. So the rent might be different due to the lease of students.
There are a variety of mixes appealing to the majority of the target market. So we calculated the rents for different types of rooms. For example, studios attract a higher rent, therefore more suitable for postgraduate students or students from wealthier backgrounds, and the twin share or cluster offerings are more affordable options.
Additionally, per capita area is an important parameter which attributes to the weekly rent. This chart shows the weekly rate differ from per capita area, and this graph shows the ratio of per capita area in different ranges. Rooms with a per capita area of 11 to 13 square meter are the most, and they cost more than rooms with a per capita area of less than 11 and extra large rooms. Finally, it is a future plan of our research. The first step is to screen for variables and build a model, then choose the form of the equation, set the function. The third step is data fitting. Put the data into a model for calculation, then analyze whether the data conforms to the model. Eliminate variables with weak significance and return variables with strong significance. Finally, analyze the results and draw conclusions. This is the end of our presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, and this is a very interesting topic. I mean, and even especially in the university sector. I mean, the theoretical model is okay. However, I think one thing you have to make it more clear or specify in the future is that how do you define the parameters? Because now I can see you have included different type of rent, different type of rooms. I mean, you must align all the standard with within the model. For example, are you going to use the rent for each apartment, or you are going to use the rent per square meters, or something? You must unify the units. And also there was some parameters. I mean, you mentioned a lot of different distance, and I mean different types of distance. I mean, it's like you should make it clear how to generate those distances. I mean, don't make it too complicated. And also say, for example, you are looking for the apartment in Melbourne University and RMIT campus, right?
Yeah, city campus.
City campus.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like how do you define? I mean, because in that case there are two samples.
Yeah.
So will you consider the RMIT's the University of RMIT's effects on the rents in Melbourne campus? So it's like, do you assume there is no cross campus effects, or there is one?
There is one.
So yeah. So and also, I mean, you include I don't quite understand the air conditioning with or without air conditioning.
Yeah.
What does it mean? It's just being the rent includes the air conditioning, or the apartment has the air conditioning.
Has the air conditioning.
Yeah. So
Some
I mean,
apartment
the thing is that
doesn't
you have to clarify this.
Okay.
So how do you define the rent? What's the rent you are going to use? So is that the contract rent, or like, for example, also the lease? Is that the rents for maybe 3 months lease rents, or for 1 year period rents, or just a median rents?
We use the median weekly rent of per person.
I mean,
yeah.
you're gonna. I mean, the thing is that what I want to highlight, you must unify all that, because currently I feel a little bit confused, because you list the different types of rents, different types of parameters. You probably include in the model. I mean, maybe in the following work you can make it consistent.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think probably maybe we cannot so certain maybe we can only do the group 13 and the group 14 probably have to present in the afternoon session. I'm sorry, however, we are run out of time. Yeah, so group 13, Sushen and Xue Yao.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Today our group will discuss the market evaluation of the housing price near the Melbourne airport. And first, I will introduce the background. Our study using the housing transaction information near the Melbourne airport to discuss the proximity to Melbourne airport, to discuss whether the proximity to airport will influence the housing sales price, because someone thinks that the transportation near the airport is really convenient, so the housing price will increase when close to airport. But others think that the price will decrease because the noise near the airport. And in our report, we will take Melbourne airport as an example to discuss the relationship between price and location. And here are three hypotheses. The first one is positive correlation, means the price will decrease gradually with proximity to Melbourne airport. And next one is negative correlation, means the price will increase. And third one is no hypothesis, means there is no relationship between price and the location. Here is a map of Melbourne airport. And the map shows the property for sale around the airport, and our sample range is within 15 kilometers around it. And then my partner will introduce the model.
Okay, in terms of theoretical model, we'd like to choose the hedonic model for the case. Hedonic model is one of the most commonly used in the property market, which can use to estimate the degree and the direction of the influence of each factors on the housing price. In this case, we want to analyze the effect of distance from airport on the housing price, so the hedonic model can be applied for the situation. In the beginning, we start to choose 13 attributes in 3 categories. For example, property type, property structure, new development, or second-hand housing. According to the location characteristics, we want to choose the logs of CBD distance, airport distance, the nearest train station distance as variables. In terms of the third characteristics, we want to choose the number of shopping centers, hospitals, or schools as variables. But by searching the data and comparing the influence degree, we filtered some least influential factors. For example, the distance from CBD, because the distance is more than 40 or 50 kilometers.
And the next part is data identification. In order to test whether the hypothesis is valid, we need to collect the data set at first. And we set 3 variables: the independent variables, dependent variables, and the control variables. And here is part of our sample. You could see that we choose several different attributes in this chart, and we will analyze some of them. For example, look at the school of community. 0 means there is no school within 2 kilometers of this property. The first point is about distance. We divide the distance into 4 parts, such as 3 to 6 kilometers, 6 to 9, 9 to 12, and 12 to 15. And through this graph, we could know that there is about 43% of total sample within 6 kilometers from the airport, and same as others. Next point is property type. And there are 3 types in our sample: the unit, villa, and house.
The proportion of units is the least, and the house accounts for the largest proportion, around 45%.
Under community factor, we also analyzed the 4 sub-attributes, namely train station, school, hospital, and shopping center. The bar chart shows the percentage of samples which have those communities within 2 kilometers in the research area. The last chart is a scattergram based on the housing price and the distance from the airport. It can be seen that the price will gradually increase with the distance, which may be due to the influence of airport noise, but the correlation is weak, which may be due to the insufficient sample size. Now I'm going to briefly introduce the flowchart about future data analysis plan. The flowchart is mainly consists of 3 parts: filtering, mapping, and modeling. The first step is data pre-processing. We will clean filter and join the raw data set to QGIS and RStudio, exporting final data set that's only comprising the information and attributes related to housing distance, which near the airport up to a shortage of 15 kilometers. In the second step, we are going to map, visualizing the distance from house to airport and showing the geographical characteristics of housing price along with the location of airports in the study area. The last step is modeling. We will build a regression model between the 2 variables and building an optimism model. In the final model, the result indicates that the relationship between the housing price and airports may be linear or nonlinear.
At the end, I will introduce the results and limitations. We want to improve that the proximity to Melbourne Airport will pose negative effect on the housing sales price. That is hypothesis 1. And there are 3 limitations. The first one is about distance. The distance in our research is the straight line distance, not the actual walking distance. And second one is that there are many factors will influence the housing sales price, but we couldn't consider all of them. And third one is that when we testing the effect of one independent variable on the dependent variable, we cannot completely control the other. Yeah, that's all. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, that's a very good research. Actually, you have already almost completed your project. Yeah.
Just the outline, brief outline.
Okay, that's great. So you move like halfway advanced the class. Okay. I have one question in regard with the 15 kilometers. How many servers being covered by the 15 kilometers area?
About 7 servers.
Sorry?
7
servers.
Yeah.
And how many data you collect? I mean, the sample of transactions.
We choose about 5 to 600. 5 to 600.
Sorry? 500
or 600. I can't remember a specific number.
And also the distance you mentioned by the schools within 2 kilometers. What does that mean? Is the distance from the sample?
From the sample, specific sample, each sample within 2 kilometers.
Wow, how did you choose that?
From the Orange and the real estate.
So
you got the access.
So means like you didn't choose sample, whatever you got you use as a sample, right? Like for a certain year.
Within the 1 kilometer.
Yes. I mean, like you choose the time and then within that kilometer area, you choose all the samples, right? All the transactions when that happened. Right?
Yeah. Okay. That's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry for group 14. So we cannot do the presentation Yeah, because there's another class in 12, so we have to end. So probably we can only present at 1 o'clock.
Or we can do 12:50.
Huh? 12:50.
Yeah.
Yeah, 12:50. Yeah, in the tutorial outside. Sorry.
That's fine.
Sorry about you guys.
Yeah, I was thought, hey, what's going on? Oi.